Is the Congress in favour of a ban on racial discrimination going into the document?
Congress is in favour of that, and in fact we've made it clear from the time that the expert panel report came out and was handed to the Prime Minister that we are strongly in support of those recommendations for a number of very good reasons. One is that there was a consensus across all of the sections of society represented on the panel, and also because the evidence was showing that the Australian public was capable of supporting those recommendations. So we have maintained that position. We said that if the government has a different proposal to offer, we would consider it, but we would also like to consult again with our constituents.
It does appear there are members within the government who are opposed to that change. If it comes down to it, if after all what you're seeking is a bipartisan approach here and it means dumping that aspect of it, are you willing to do that?
I think this is really the substance of the referendum and the what our people are hoping to see in it, and it's part of the context of addressing race in the Constitution, and I think there needs to be an understanding generally that there was provisions included in the Constitution about dealing with race, but in a negative way. That is in terms of removing people from Australia, of restricting the voting capacity of people, and so on. And in the Commonwealth's case, that it couldn't make laws for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. So this recognition is proposed to address all issues of race, including ensuring that racial discrimination is not one of the things that is exercised by the governments in Australia.
So would it then, in your view, be better to not go forward with a proposal that doesn't include that, rather than try and work on a change to the Constitution if it doesn't then touch on banning racial discrimination?
Well, I think the answer is this way, that there needs to be some reason for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples to support a referendum going forward. We're getting a lot of messages from people saying, well, we don't want to be recognised, we want to have a treaty, and we want recognition to come through that arrangement that has never happened here in Australia. So there has to be some benefit that's coming in this, otherwise it becomes a symbolic change to the Constitution, and we haven't had much support coming for that approach. So if there's another benefit that the government can provide that our people can support, then that would, I think, go to a referendum. But this is a fine-tuning thing, because it's what is the public capable of supporting, this double majority requirement. The majority of people in the majority of states is necessary for it to succeed.
Yeah, Liz, you say what's the public capable of supporting? Is the issue here perhaps that it's a little confusing? The argument hasn't been articulated clearly because I guess the politicians are arguing about it, exactly what should be in and what should be out. And therefore, the average Australian is going to be a little confused about what this all means.
Yes, and we see that confusion, and unfortunately we've seen the confusion increase over the years since the expert panel's report comes out. But remember that the expert panel report was published as a book with a number of chapters dealing with very specific questions. So the answers are there. It's for people who are just trying to sort of address headlines that are creating, I think, this confusion and difficulty with people now understanding it. And I was in conversations last week where people who had previously known what the recommendations were a couple of years ago are now asking me, what's the referendum about, what's going on? They are confused. The other thing is to note is that the parliamentary committee, select committee that has been examining this, has produced, I think that's its third report now, and the final report. And in all cases, it has continued to include the reference to addressing discrimination. The final report provides 3 different options of how to address that, and that's, I think, going to be part of the discussion that happens from this point with the government.
Now, Liz, in your conversations with people around the country in terms of what the National Congress is doing with consultation and what have you, is there a consensus that's being formulated already among Indigenous communities, or is there still a divide in terms of what you think Indigenous Australians will be wanting, and how will that then be presented to the Prime Minister?
Yeah, it's been changing over these years, but when the we were involved in the original investigation. We did a lot of consultation around communities, and there was a support for the proposals. And the support was reluctant because people wanted more, but we tried to explain that it wouldn't succeed in the referendum. So we said there's a balance here, there's something to be gained, and people said, well, okay, we will support if that's the situation. Now we're finding a lot of voices coming up and saying, look, we don't think this is where we want to go. We're having this experience of communities being closed, of funding problems going to our organisations, of lack of control being taken away from communities, handed over to non-government organisations, and so on. And we reported to the committee at the last hearing that we are hearing our people saying we will vote no against the referendum because we don't support anything the government will do with the way that they're treating us. So they're more or less throwing away the logic of all this because they're reacting to what's going on. So, and we told that to the government, and I think that's been part of the call to have this meeting now with Prime Minister, with the Leader of the Opposition, and have a discussion about proceeding.
So that summit tomorrow, Les, how important is it that at the end of that, the Prime Minister, the Opposition Leader, yourself and other Indigenous leaders walk out of there as one and say we agree with the way forward? If that doesn't happen, do you foresee problems occurring?
There certainly would be problems, and I'm hoping that's what we will be able to do, come out and say this is the way forward. I don't expect tomorrow we will see the model to go to the referendum, but we'll be asking in the process, when will we see that model? When will particularly the political parties and the leadership agree, get this multi-party support to go forward? We know there are voices of opposition coming from individual parliamentarians, some of it unreasonable, and those voices are going at risk of getting more attention and being heard more unless we make progress from this point.
Les, do you believe that there is scope, as put forward by Noel Pearson, for instance, for some form of a recognised Indigenous advisory body to be made part of the amendments to the Constitution to allow, for instance, for more control for Indigenous people?
Well, Noel, as he has always done, has put a lot of thought into the current dilemma and worked out how to provide a solution that the most conservative of the people will accept, and that's why he's put this model forward. He has said he has tested it, and there are people that are saying they're willing to support that. So it has its merits. However, from our point of view as Congress, because we have to show national leadership on defending the rights of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, the question remains for us, will this model provide guarantee or protection against bad legislation, against bad policies in the future? All it does is allow for advice to go to the government, but still the government becomes sovereign in that sense and decides what it wants to do. And I don't know that Aboriginal people are willing to trust it to that point, given the history that we've had on these issues.
Les Malezer, co-chair of the National Congress for Australia's First People, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.